The Lindbergh Schools Special Board of Education meeting 1556 is now called to order. Dr. Lake, do we have any changes to the agenda?
We do not.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Mike,
Second.
second by Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Now we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We have action items by consent 4.01 to 4.03. Would anyone want to remove any of these items for individual consideration? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the action items by consent 4.01 to 4.03 as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Matt,
Second.
second by Julia. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We have one individual action item this morning, 5.01, adoption of the 2022-2023 preliminary budget. And Mrs. Scheibel.
Okay, this is, again, the adoption for next fiscal year, which is 2022, 2023. Our fiscal year is from July 1 through June 30. The budget is an instrument that really provides financial policy for the direction of the business operations of a school district. It provides a detailed outline of the probable expenditures and anticipated revenue for the fiscal year. It's one of the most important documents for a school district. It's not static. As you know, we bring budget amendments every month, but a working document that changes throughout the year. Board-approved amendments and actual financial data is really where we're at the end of the year. And then each month we'll bring information to update that. Bottom line is, I think for our district is we have two main revenue sources, which are local. And local is what revenue from personal property, real estate, and commercial in the area. That's 80% of our revenue. And then we have some state revenue as a second source. Our federal revenue is slight, maybe 2% of our total budget. You can cross out that slight statement for the last 2 years because we received a lot of one-time money during the COVID for, to get us through the pandemic. And I should probably clarify, a lot of money is like $3 million. We are one of the districts that, did not see a lot of federal aid. Any federal aid was helpful because we spent a lot of money during those 2 years to make school happen, but we were one of the lowest across the state as far as federal subsidization for COVID. We're also, as far as a budget, we're on like a 2-year cycle because assessed valuation is, and district properties are only reassessed every other year. On the non-reassessment year, our income is lower. So we are going into a non-reassessment year for local property taxes, which means that you don't have the drive-by assessor going around and looking at property. What we do get on a non-reassessment year is new construction. So if there's property that did not exist in the previous year, we will get that on our books for the next year. Our district is not like a Wentzville where we're building subdivisions, so that kind of new property is not what we see. But what we'll see is, for example, the Bass Pro Shop that is taking over down there, the Toys R Us, and that value will be more than the property that was there before, so they consider that new construction. So both of that, the data on new construction and actual growth for local revenue is not really known until August. So when we're setting our budget in June, by statute, we have to adopt a budget in June, we really don't know our main revenue source. We're estimating, what that will be until we get the numbers. We also know from history that the estimates that St. Louis County gives on reassessment years, they do give us an estimate on reassessment years. Their estimates are not very reliable. So we do a lot of guessing at this point, and then also coming out of a crazy 2 years and now living in a economy that is also crazy with inflation. There's a lot of assumptions in this budget. The second source of revenue, our state revenue, we rely heavily on student attendance. I think we're one of the few states, maybe 3 in the United States, that still paid school districts based on student attendance. And so and you're always paid the next year on the prior attendance. So as you know, the last couple of years, student attendance have not been great. I mean, we had a massive pandemic. Lindbergh is used to historically that a growing district, we increase enrollment every year, maybe by 100, 150 students, and then when you increase enrollment, you also increase attendance. And then kids come to school when everybody's healthy. So being a non-reassessment year if local, that's a hit, on our budget. And then attendance is a hit in our budget. Thank you to Michelle McRoy and the team upstairs from Teaching and Learning to work with me to push out our attendance data from last year, because that was one of the things that we were waiting on. Is it going to go down? Is it going to go up? Because right now, as far as attendance, we're getting paid on the 2019-2020 school year, because every year since then has been lower. So the state allows you to get paid on one of the first, the current year, the next year, if it's a growing year, are the 2 preceding. So the 2019-2020 year was our best attendance year in the last 3 years. And so that was what is in my budget. So we worked up to the last minute this week, as of 2 days ago, to figure out what our attendance was at the end of the school year. And we're very, very, very close to the 2019-2020 school year attendance. That is good because next year we would have had to go, next year the state is allowing districts to keep the 4th preceding year because they know that there's been a dip due to COVID. And so that has been a big worry of mine, because if they didn't allow that and they made us go on the year that COVID happened, our dip in attendance was like 500 ADA. It would be like a $3 million cut. And so we've avoided that cliff, if anything. We're showing very much signs of recovery. Enrollment is up, and we just need to get the attendance rate back up, and hopefully we'll get back into that growth pattern that has been historically what Lindbergh is in. So the budget has been presented. Again, it is a working document. I guess I should talk about the other hit we've got on the Strain Japan. Strain Japan, that sounds crazy. Not Strain Japan, the country.
Blankenship. The Blankenship.
Yeah,
it's easier to
it's
say.
Strain Japan,
the
Strain School District in Franklin County. Very small school district, but last year in June, it was June 21st when we got the information from the state auditor's office. There was a lawsuit about how the state auditor's office calculated tax levies. They look back to the last time, I guess, that was modified, which was 2007, and there was a controversy over the minimum levy districts have. You levy annually, but you can never go over your under your minimum or over your maximum levy. And so this lawsuit was one. It's called Blankenship lawsuit. I reference it in the budget message for those who want to explore that more. But it affects districts who had a tax levy since 2008. So it's not every district in the state. It also affected municipalities or cities or counties. It's not just school districts. Anybody who sets a tax rate for revenue. On June 21st, we got the notice that we had to adjust our maximum levy. So that really is the baseline when you're setting your taxes. I think Dr. Lake remembers the day when I got that notice and I really didn't want to come to work. No, but because I ran the numbers straight out, and it was over a $2 million cut to our budget immediate, because there's an emergency clause for it to be effective with the next budget. You really didn't hear a lot about this last year because we kind of pulled out of a negative quickly for 2 reasons. One, when we redid our calculation based on the new data from the state auditor's office, it rolled our levy back under the state minimum, which is $2.75. So we were able to, it was a 12-cent reduction on our levy, straight out. We were able to gain some of that back because we couldn't go below the minimum. So we are now at the minimum for residential at $2.75 due to that. The second thing was, last year was a reassessment year, which was helpful. And then our new construction was the most I've ever seen in our history in this district as far as what is happening, and it was all commercial. So having a very, very high new construction, a little bit of new revenue in a reassessment year, and being able to roll up, we were able to pull out of that fiscal crisis for 1 year. But that reduction is ongoing. I mean, we lost that money that we should have gotten, and we're not going to get it back. It's not going to increase for that reason, but it is an ongoing loss, and that's about $1.5 million annually. So revenue, like I said, those are the two big items, and both of those are
St. Louis County.
the St. Louis County.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, because
Yeah.
when you add the 1.5 and what St. Louis County, that kind of gets to that 1.7
Yeah.
of loss of revenue.
Yeah, it's 200,000.
Yeah.
So, again, St. Louis County provides us the details on what we set our levy. We get it late August, and we bring the levy for adoption in October 1. And when I set my levy last year, or we set our levy last year, they gave us an assessed valuation number that we relied upon when we fill out the state auditor's form. In December, they give you your final assessed valuation based on everything that hit the books that year. When we got that notice in, I think, January 11th of this year, our assessed valuation was lower than it was when they gave us the data in August, by about 25 million. And so at that, again, it's like, well, what happened? How do we lose revenue? Because historically, you can look at it, we've always gained maybe a little bit because something was not on the books. I mean, not a substantial amount, but it has not gone down that much. So at that point, I reached out to the St. Louis County legal team and went back and forth for probably a couple months in trying to get answers. And then when the final answer came in right before our budget workshop in March, it was really, well, we were behind and there were some things that didn't get on the books, and I was like, well, maybe when you could tell us that in October, you know what I mean? So as we know, when you set levies, when your assessed valuation goes higher than inflation, you only get the lower of the two. And so we rolled back our levy because last year assessed valuation was higher than inflation. And so we would not have had to roll our levy back. I'm thinking it's about 2 cents. I've never done this recoupment thing before because it's not something that has happened in our district before, where they gave us a higher number in October and then the lower number in the future. So I'm estimating that number to be about a $200,000 gain, which means we should have got that $200,000 this year. So we didn't get it this year, so they're gonna let us recoup it next year. So they're gonna pay us back for what we lost last year and then also fix it going forward. So there are a lot of odd things on the revenue side that occurred this year. And then when you look at the expenditure side, you can also say there's a lot of odd things that happened on the expenditure side because of the pandemic, because of the economy, because of COVID. I think this is a good budget. Well, I guess the other thing I could say about revenue is we do have several pending one-time revenue items coming in from federal government due to COVID. $2.3 million in ESSER dollars is still not received yet. We've been waiting. It was supposed to get it last year. The thing with that money is we're really just paying ourselves for expenditures that we did the prior 2 years with COVID. We don't really have any extra money from that $3 million or $3.5 million that we got for all revenue sources with COVID. We spent it. We spent it on bringing kids back to school, getting kids, getting teachers and dividing classrooms and dividing buses and getting safety devices and masks in school. We spent it. And so our fund balances have gone down in the last couple of years because we invested in, education and instruction and getting kids back. So that money really is one time. When it comes in, we need to pay ourselves back. We need to use it for one-time reasons. I did not put that in the budget. I don't think that's a good reflection to put in the budget because it's one time. So I'm saying I could put that in there and we'd be close. We'd be at a balanced budget. you know, but it's kind of like going on a diet. You can hide it for a day, but if you don't really honest about it, you know, and change habits in the future, you're not gonna get it. So another one-time revenue source for next year is transportation. The state they've got semester money too, and so they're fully funding transportation for the first time since the 90s. Never in my career has transportation been fully funded. Fully funded means that we're eligible to get 75% of our eligible expenditures on transportation. Our transportation budget is close to $3 million. If the statute was funded as it's supposed to be, we would get 70% of that back. Historically, in my career, and it's gotten worse over time, we're funded about 20% back on transportation. And so, you know, we really work to be efficient in that area because it's just local dollars, and if you're not efficient, then we can't use it for other sources. So they're going to fully fund it next year. That looks to be about $700,000. They haven't said when we're going to get that money either, you know. The unfortunate thing on that is the last 2 years with transportation, you're funded on how many kids ride the bus, your ridership. We do ridership counts twice a year officially for the state, weekly or monthly, just to make sure we're being efficient. And then the miles you travel. So if you, and then they compare you to other districts in the state. Well, you can know the last 2 years with transportation, our ridership has been lower than normal. If you go back and look at the COVID year, our ridership fell off the mark, as you can tell by the parent pickup lines across the district. But, and so we're going to be paid by the state on ridership that was also low. Just like attendance was low, ridership was low. So it's nice that they're going to give us the extra money, but it's on a low ridership year. So we will see how that hits. I did not include that in the budget either, so that's another one-time revenue source that we could put in here and we could balance the budget. But it's not really talking about, you know, where we're at. So that's on the revenue side. Of course, it's not a pretty picture for next year's budget. We always are optimistic about the next year, which is a reassessment year, and another year past COVID where maybe there'll be some recovery. On the expenditure side, I'm proud of the board for, like I should say, I'm proud of the board, but for making some decisions that, you know, were hard, I think, because the budget is not balanced, but we didn't sacrifice staff or programming. Another thing in our world right now is labor shortages and supply chain, you know, shortages. One of the biggest things in this budget, I think, is addressing support staff. You know, you can go to Deerberg's and make $18 an hour, and McDonald's to make $15, and so those were large increases to be competitive, we need to look at those rates this year. Ours were not at that mark, and I think our principals, our admin assistants, everybody that has been in a building, even teachers, have seen that over the course of 2 years that we don't have enough staff to get things done. And so they are working and being cafeteria workers, being lunch supervisors, being recess aides, because we can't get those support staff that are so crucial to business operations for a district. We can't just hire them. So making a base rate increase in most areas of support staff and instructional support staff as well, in a time when we are really not, our revenue is not going up, I think was a major mark to show that those people are important and that we recognize that things are changing with base rates. So the other positive on the expenditure side is that we are working through a 3-year plan. We settled early with teachers, I think probably a little bit earlier than last year on a 3-year agreement. Salaries and benefits are, of course, the number one expenditure. You've got 2 local sources of revenue, the taxes and the state, and on the other side, our biggest expenditure is staff. I mean, we're in the business of staff. And so we have an agreement of a 3% increase this year, a 4% next year, and then a 3% the third year. So that really helps on the budget side because that largest part of our expenditure budget is known. It's a known factor. So we can really start looking at budgets in December of next year. Not really, Dr. Lake, but in December.
September.
It's going to be monthly with budget amendments, but having that factor known in a time when other things are crazy on the revenue and expenditure side is very helpful. We did the 3-4-3 because that does match our local reassessment cycle. Next year's budget is a non-reassessment year. The next budget cycle after that will be our assessment year, so we assume we will get more money. And then the 3-year, so that goes with that. So I have to thank the board also for working with staff and teachers and getting that in play, because that will be a big factor as we budget forward.
Joelle, just quickly talk about the fund balance and where we are, and that it's
Yep.
very responsible and still very safe, and even running a deficit budget a little bit next year, it's minuscule of what it does to our fund
Yep.
balance, even if it comes in at that, what we're projecting it to be, so.
Yep, I think there's a summary in the budget document that shows beginning balance. These are projected again, all of these are projected because things change, it is a working document. But, we have a couple other checks to post and things to pay before we get, did you get the P-card payment done? That's one that is gonna hit. This is my team out here, they're also back there, and I couldn't get this document done without them. So I appreciate all their work the last few weeks, or the whole month of June to make this work. But it actually shows in the summary this year, I've showed fund balance for the last 3 years, because I think that's important to see where we've been. And even have a deficit budget this year in operations, it really is a 1%, it is like a little bit more than a 1%.
I don't think it's even a full percent.
Yeah, decrease in that percentage. The percentage we look at in June, they say, what is your fund balance percentage? It's a question across school districts and with labor unions, and they want to know what your fund balance is in June. That number is how it's calculated is it takes your operating expenditures, which is general fund and teachers fund, and then the capital operating, that for the year, and it divides it by your fund balance. Your fund balance is divided by that. So it's kind of like them saying is, if you lost all of your revenue, how many months could you live? Like when you got your first apartment out of college, and mom said, have so much money in the bank, in case you lose your job, then you can live for 3 months while you work something out. So that's a factor of what that is. So deficit balance on a $90 million budget in this amount doesn't bring that percentage down very much. Now, if that is a reoccurring deficit and that pulls down, then that's an issue. I wanted to put the 3-year trend on here because we're being transparent on, 2 or 3 years ago, it was a higher fund balance. But we used that in a strategic way to do some things that hadn't been done for a while in our district, and a lot of that is related to capital improvements. I don't know if we have to look at Dr. Lake for that, because he walks around the buildings and has a lot of ideas on how things could be improved, and there were things that were deferred too long and needed to be approved. So there were some strategic expenditures that we needed to do, but it were one-time expenditures. They're not things that we're investing in full-time and that are going to take our balance down. So when you look across, right now, looking at the end of next year, being at a 23% fund balance in June is not fiscally irresponsible. I had talked to Dr. Lake about a district in my past life where I went into that district and it was at a 3%, and you get on the state books when you're at a 3% fund balance. Dr. Lake and I have a number in our head that we think is fair, and we don't want to go back past that.
And we're getting close, that's getting close. Where we are right now is kind of where Joelle and I are kind of like, we need to, really check our reoccurring and adding any kind of reoccurring expenses and things until revenue can catch up for that loss of revenue with the lawsuit and then.
And the state.
In the state, in the 88. So we just, we really, we're in good financial shape. But we need to we're going to be conservative and kind of put a pause on some of the things and make sure we really watch it over the next 2 years. So. And that's why that 3-year salary was so important for us to get with all groups in negotiations. It'll really allow us to plan and pay ourselves back to where we need to be, so.
Right. And when you look at that fund balance percentage in June, that is in June, I'd like to remind everybody again, I say it over and over, you probably get tired of me here saying it, but, June is not really a good reflection of our lowest point in the year. We get paid once, we get state aid every month, but our biggest paycheck comes in January from the county. And so we get that big paycheck in January, and then we've got to live on it for a whole year. So June is really the halfway marker when we're looking at November, December, before we get our big paycheck. Those are our lowest points in the year. And so also built into this budget is some carryover money, which is about $1 million from our buildings that are carrying over from last year that they didn't spend, which is a great thing because it keeps us efficient on what they spend it for. We'll hold that carryover release until January when we get our paycheck. So our finances, as far as fund balance, are where we want them to be right now.
Well, and you didn't talk about also, we have in this budget, and we may not need to spend it, but it's there, is about $500,000 for staff, just to solve problems if growth really shoots up, if we get 200 more kids instead of what we're predicting of 75 to 100 or all of that, that's in there. So that money, probably right now, Brian even has two more positions as well. So there's, like Joelle has said earlier, there is money here that if we wanted to present this as a balanced budget, the $1 million of carryover money, that's money that they're not spending, but they're saving up for bigger projects like we've talked about. If we needed to say, you know what, we got to balance our budget, we got to take that away, we can do those kinds of things. So again, but I think it's important that we're really trying to show we don't want to disrupt student experiences, staff experiences, and those kinds of things. And this is even though it says deficit, this is a responsible year for us financially, even though it looks that way. And I know that's unique. It's only happened a couple other times, I think, in the district. And so, but also in those couple other times, they didn't come out of a pandemic and other things as well. And what I would say, back to what Joelle said, you as a board have prioritized student in-person learning, and we spent money to make sure that we could do that safely until we knew what we were, how we were going to navigate these waters. So I think that's important for our community and for this board to know. But we are taking a very conservative approach to this because we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So
Said it all very succinctly. So all this data, there's a lot of data in the budget message that explains this, probably easier to read than me explaining all of it. But that is the fact that, we could balance this, but I think it's starting the year with this, it's the months after that it's going to take the work. So this is the line, and then every month with budget amendments and input and our compass goals, I think maybe some of our investigate, research, and adopt will look different based on this budget, and like, what do we need to look at? We're always working on efficiency, so that never stops. I think that's another item on here that, over the course of 3 years, due to looking at efficiencies in all areas, we have saved, over 1.5 million. If we weren't doing that, where would this budget be at that time? But that's a continuous thing that doesn't stop. I have a great team that they probably get tired of me saying, what's the next efficiency? How you can save money on that? They're the ones that spend the time looking at trash bills and energy and, how can we make sure we're doing everything in great, but making sure we're efficient about it. AT&T phone bills, that happens daily. So I think there'll be different things that come out of our conversations as a board and administration over the next 12 months just because of this. And I appreciate that. So the hard work is not today, the hard work is ahead, and trying to balance this budget.
So you mentioned that we should be getting the federal ESSER money. If we do get that payment, will that be put in the reserve account, or where does that go? You said we'll pay ourselves back.
Yep.
I'm just wondering how that looks.
It would go into fund balance and operating fund balance right now. Again, that money's already been spent. The biggest part of that money, it's 2.3 million, is we're paying ourselves back for our investment in technology. When we had a one-to-one plan ready to go, but weren't ready to implement it quite as fast.
it was a 3-year rollout, and
Yeah, it was a
became
3-year rollout,
a 1-month rollout when COVID hit.
And so, we were headed down that path, but then the pandemic hit and everybody had to have computers. So we spent a lot of money, and that's the biggest part of we're going to pay ourselves back on that. We also had some programming that was different with, the ARC with virtual learning options, which we kept through this year because some people are still, this year were, not ready to come back full force, and so we had that programming.
Well, and I think that goes to why Brian is in good shape. We hired several teachers during the first year of the pandemic to do our full, if you remember, our largest elementary school during the 2021 school year was our ARC Elementary. That's where most of our, that was our largest elementary. And so we hired additional people to basically
A lot of additional people.
run an elementary school virtually and keep the same number of teachers in person to keep those class sizes the way we needed. So again, we had these people already on our books, and so as people have even retired, we haven't needed to replace them because we had already hired them 2 years ago that are still on our books. So that $500,000 that's sitting there, we may need to tap into it. And if we do tap into that hire teachers is a good thing, because that means we grew more than what we had anticipated, which is more revenue because we are on the formula, and that increases our ADA. So it's, so again,
We always have at least one ad knock.
Yes,
I'm saying it's going to happen,
absolutely.
right, Brian?
Yeah.
He could probably put a mark on it today. So, just putting that in there now instead of, the budget being, again, not putting that in there and know it's coming down the pike, it's just better to do it that way. So we will put that in there. Also, the same thing with the transportation money. I don't want to use that to fund salaries because those salaries will be there next year, a year out, but that revenue won't. Yep.
And just to clarify with the transportation money, so we pay for it, and then the idea is that we will get paid back at that 70%-ish threshold.
Yep, it is. All the expenditures are paid from our end, and then that's calculated based on, at the end of the year, we return a report on our miles and our student ridership, and then they fund us that over 12 months of the next year. So, So our 12-month, our monthly payment from transportation is going to go up for 1 year.
But, and again, that 70% is if we were as efficient as we could be.
Yeah.
And we all know that we've been unwinding the culture of picking everybody up at the end of their driveway to be able to get more dollars because of that. We're just losing money by not being efficient with our transportation. And again, you'll never be 70%. It's just, you just can't.
Yeah.
But we need to be closer to that than where we are. And that's Joelle, and I know Shelley and her team and our bus company has been really working hard at making us more efficient to get more dollars back so we can put them back in the classroom for our kids. So.
There was, of course, transportation and food service, both, we're seeing increases in that contract this year. We both, on both of those programs, needed to increase their staff wages for the same reason we did. And so we had a 5-year contract with First Student, but the board adopted that last month, an increase in their contract so that they could raise the wages of their drivers, so that they could compete and get drivers in. So food service did the same thing with their 5-year contract. So those are items beyond just our salaries that are contracted services, that some of those may be the reason you see the difference between when we bring the estimated expenditures in March. That's very early. And between March and June, which Dawn is not here, she's out sick today. Okay, the other half of my team joined. So we've gone through every single line item. We did look at that increase in the transportation contract and the food service contract came in between that time. 3 months is a long time to really push through the details. At March, we didn't have all the final salary schedules. From March to today, we've gone through every salary schedule. You guys adopted that at the last board meeting, released the salary schedules to support staff after the last board meeting. So all of that detail was done between March and that. So our expenditures went up a little bit just because we had more data. And then our revenue also went up a little bit because we had more data. I think they didn't match, but, there was changes since March, and there always will be.
On the Blankenship case, I may have missed it.
Okay.
Is there an end date, or we just?
Well, it was a one-time hit.
Just a
Well,
one-time.
one time, but it's recurring. So what happened in June, last year, June 21st, they said, you've got to adjust your calculations. And so they sent us the numbers that, we have several items that we put in that are maximum and minimum levies. And the one that changed on that one was the maximum levy. There's a chart that showed every year, because I thought they were going to make us have to go back and correct every single year, but what they did was just take from 2008 till last year a number and changed your maximum levy. So with that line item and the calculation changing, our revenue is just down that 1.5 million forever. You know, and like I said, last year we were able to kind of see that not as the 1.5 million, it was because our new construction was so high, the highest it's ever, like I said, ever been in this district. It was over $20 million. I think when when St. Louis County gave us an estimate on new construction in March last year, they told us it was going to be like $5 million. And so that's what I write my budget. And then in August, when it came in, it was like $20 million. And so we were like, it's a perfect storm. That's going to cover that. And blah, blah, blah. So, you know, a lot happens on the revenue side, and not most people want to hear about it too often. If you're on the finance committee that meets monthly, we have some of these engaging conversations, and I think that group, we hope, takes that information out to our public and explains, you know, the why behind things. It's not just, I think most people don't know that when assessed valuation is higher than actual growth, that we have to roll our levy back. I did print that out today before I came, because I think that was another, looking at, since we did our last tax levy increase, I think in 2010, it was a 65 cent. If you look at the trend since that point and how much we have to roll back because of assessed valuation being higher than inflation rate, is every other year we have a rollback. In the 2019-20 year, there was a large assessed valuation increase. It was 17.58%, but inflation was 1.9%. And so we can only grow by inflation. So that year alone, we had to roll our levy back 31 cents. And so when you look at 2010 to now, I mean, in 2010, after our 65 cent levy increase for operations, we were at 417, and now we're at 382. And it's a combination of rollbacks. Unfortunately, AV and inflation are always on the opposite end, and we seem to be on the losing end. So we're in a time now that nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think it's important, that's the blended rate.
Yep, that's the blended rate.
Because when we
Yep.
talk about the 275,
Yep.
I think it's important.
And it includes debt.
Yeah, and it includes debt.
Yep.
275 is on our residential. So your homes, our patrons that own homes, and is at their tax rate is at the lowest state it's the minimum state, 275. It cannot be any lower than 275.
No.
So, but that's our blended.
That's our blended rate. St. Louis County is unique in that, or unique in a lot of ways, but yeah, we have to set 5 rates in St. Louis County. One for agricultural, one for commercial, one for residential, one for personal property. And so when we talk about a rate, it's the blended rate is a simplicity. I could sit here, you know, yes, residential is 275 and tell you what all the other ones are, but that's also in the board packet.
Does anyone have any questions? Any more questions?
I just want to say that I'm just like continually impressed by your work, and just thank you for everything you're doing and for making it manageable for me to understand.
Well, that's okay. You can ask me questions anytime. Sometimes it's not manageable for us to understand because it changes so often, you know, legislation and crazy things. So we're always learning. It's not a dull job. And that's why I do ask my team to sit out here, because they're all part of what happens day to day, and it's a lot of work.
Yes.
Thank you to everybody then. Yeah.
Thank you to you and your team and for attending today, in case we have more questions. Are we ready to make a motion? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the June 30th, 2022 year-end transfers, the 2022-2023 budget for all funds, and the internally restricted funds on July 1st, 2022 as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Christie,
Second.
second by Megan. And now questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We will move to 6.0 recess. Today's executive session was canceled as there is no need. We will now move to 8.0 adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn special board meeting 1556?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Megan, second by Christie. I wasn't sure. I gave it to Christie. I heard her louder. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Special Board Meeting 1556 is adjourned.